Thank the chairman. I think it's a quick question to a friend from South Carolina with respect to prices. My other friend from South Carolina was just talking about. Could you speak a little bit to? We've heard a lot about record high production in oil and so forth. Talk a little bit about prices, price impact, what's going on, with respect to gas, oil, because of the constraints of this administration and my Democratic colleagues.
Yeah, so from day one, the Biden administration had a war on American energy production. They were very clear on the campaign trail they were going to do that. They ended production on federal land, offshore federal areas in the OCS. They continued to use the Department of Energy and regulations to push green initiatives at the detriment to oil and gas producers, refiners, through regulatory environment. What we're trying to do is increase production in this country, increase delivery in this country through pipeline permitting reform and a build out of an infrastructure that's needed vastly. Utilize those resources to lower energy prices for Americans by the power companies, and then export cleaner burning U.S. produced natural gas to lower carbon emissions, but help our friends and allies in places like Europe that are relying on Russia and having to look west and look at other sources for energy. Allow more production at home, create jobs. I think the estimate of jobs that would be created here through increased energy production is somewhere between 220,000 and 453,000 American jobs by 2040. This LNG exports could add between $50 and $73 billion U.S. economy. Produce it here, keep the money here, keep the jobs here, and help lower global carbon emissions by allowing folks like Vietnam or China or anywhere else that wants to buy natural gas on a global market to lower their carbon emissions. India, I can go through a whole litany of countries that we could export gas to help lower their carbon emissions, while also sending it to places like Africa where they can raise their standard of living, actually heat and cool their homes and cook food over cleaner burning U.S. produced natural gas. It just works to produce natural gas and oil here in this country, be able to export it to help our friends and allies around the world, keep the money, keep the jobs here, and grow the U.S. economy. There is no national security without energy security, and we can do it through supporting a good export market. I yield back.
Energy prices have increased by 39% since Biden took office. Does that sound right to you? Gasoline up 53%, gas now $3.83 a gallon, electricity up 26%. Data I have says the United States could increase gas production 50% and LNG exports fourfold over the next decade if allowed to carry out its market potential.
That's correct.
We talked about China earlier. Better or worse to make China dependent on American natural gas? I mean, putting aside whatever you want to say about it, which would be better for our national security and for the world to make? Would it be better or worse if China were to be dependent on the United States American natural gas, particularly considering that China has 1,100 or so, give or take, coal-fired plants that are producing, I don't know, 2 a week, and we have about 250 or so and are producing none. What would you think? Better for us, better for the world if we had more liquefied natural gas going out and gas production and China consuming it, or no?
Better for us and better for the world. Lower carbon emissions. And what's ironic about the power plants they're building, the coal-fired power plants they're building, they're utilizing them to produce electricity, to produce the solar panels and the wind turbines and other things that they turn around and sell back to us as we push to lower the American standard of living by increasing more renewables.
Last week we had a witness, a Democratic witness, who couldn't answer the question about the fact that batteries for cars, in particular for EVs, that the cobalt that's mined to produce those batteries is heavily mined by slave labor and often child labor. Do you find that to be a particularly abhorrent practice, and that it might be better to live and produce live off of and produce American energy?
I agree with you. And in the mining aspect and the energy aspect, nobody does it cleaner and better and more environmentally sensitive than the United States of America. China's using child labor and raping the environment in places like Africa where they mine these critical minerals for the EVs.
If we had vastly expanded our ability to export natural gas earlier and weren't constrained by this administration, European dependence on Russia for energy would be reduced, correct?
That's correct.
Gas accounts for about 20% of the EU's power generation, and I believe Russia accounted for about 40% of EU gas consumption. In 2020, Russian gas accounted for 48% of Europe's natural gas imports. Is it better for our national security? Is it better for us to export liquefied natural gas in order to, I don't know, stick it to Russia?
That sounds correct.
In 2021, the U.S. became the top LNG exporter to the EU, accounting for 26% of total. However, pipeline gas made up 74% of EU gas imports. Are the current Democrat administration policies hampering our ability to compete and export LNG on the world stage?
They are.
Does that increase or diminish our national security?
Diminishes our national security.
Does that help or hurt, say, Russia and some of our competitors?
It supports Vladimir Putin's oligarch and puts money in the pocket to fund the war in Ukraine.
Overall, I would just suggest on the point about H.R. 1 and having another bill is hardly something new in this institution when we have a larger package that we break off an individual component of it and move it in isolation because of its critical import for the well-being of this country. Not because it's for some particular industry per se. I would ask my colleague one final question. The Inflation Reduction Act, talk about the benefit for a specific industry. Do 90% of the subsidies go to billion-dollar corporations of the big corporate subsidies in the Inflation Reduction Act?
Generally in the green initiatives, yes.
Yeah, and are the lion's share of the subsidies for EVs and so forth going to families that make up to multi-$100,000 a year in order to use those subsidies?
Sounds correct.
Yeah, I yield back.